This is Michael and Micah from the Middle East. We're excited to share with you. And we thought the slide templates were a suggestion, not a rule. So we made our own templates. We kind of painted outside the lines a little bit. But we're excited to share with the Middle East region, representing 21 different countries, roughly 600 million people in our region. So we kind of took our own take on these questions, asked ourselves where we're starting from today.
Yes. And we're actually up here because there's a number of people that maybe from our region would be better at what we're doing, but can't because they're wearing red lanyards. And so we got the default on it, and also red doesn't look great on me. So let's start with where we're at presently. I mean, taking a cue from the red lanyards, obviously some of what we are facing is institutional. We are facing institutional challenges by what Christianity is in our region. And we're all brought here together. How do we change the trajectory of Christianity? That's not our problem. Christianity is moving. It's moving for the first time in many of our countries, and it's awesome. But we want to stay in line with God's heart and not with cultural influences and all sorts of things like that. So we have a real problem with division in our region. Not sure if you've heard about it, but we have wars all over, and we've got problems between Arabs and Jews, in Islam, between Sunni and Shia. We have problems all over the place. So that's kind of where we're at as far as with division. And then what was the last one? Feelings of hopelessness with the young people from Yemen to Syria to Lebanon and Libya and all over the place. We have this feeling of what's going to happen. It's institutional, really, like I said, with the government coming against it. But then what happens when someone does come to faith? When someone comes to faith in our regions, even I'm a foreigner where I live in the UAE, but even on my residency, it says my religion. And so what happens when someone comes to faith is that they can't actually change their religion legally. They can change it in their hearts, they can change it in their families, and then that really becomes a problem in marriage. What happens when you can't marry someone of your same religion because you can't change it legally? So that's a little bit of where we're at in the present.
Yeah, and as Micah shared, we as we were asking ourselves the question, we have a very small percentage of Christians and believers in the Middle East, but we don't need to turn the trajectory. Actually, we have people coming to faith more than before. We simply see ourselves as needing to steward and to what's the other word I hear? Steward and accelerate the move of God that He's already doing amongst young people. So, for example, the fastest growing church in the world right now is happening in the nation of Iran and spreading mostly among the women in that country. And so we're seeing a huge move of God. We're seeing people running towards the faith, and I think we can actually answer some of the questions of why we see that happening. But it was a little bit different than what we've seen some of the global trends as well. We also believe that the biggest revival we're going to see is going to happen out of the Middle East. I don't know if you know, but most of our Bible was written about the Middle East region. And as we we're reflecting on some of the prophetic promises for our region, we started looking at things like Romans chapter 11, where we see this promise of all of Israel being saved. We look at Jeremiah 2, which talks about God reigning and ruling from Jerusalem and all the nations coming together around there. We see Isaiah chapter 19, which is not maybe commonly talked about, but this highway from Egypt through Israel to Assyria, which is modern-day Lebanon and Syria and some of Iraq as well. This highway where God says, Egypt, my people, and Assyria, my inheritance and the work of my hands. So we see this prophetic picture. And then even in Jeremiah 49, we see this promise where God says He's going to do something pretty amazing to the people of Elam. And Elam is southern Iran. And He says that His throne will be in Iran. And then He's going to do something special with the people of Iran. So we see these prophetic promises, this prophetic picture. And for us, that kind of gives us this vision of a future of a region, revival in this region, and where we have seen division for so long, people coming together. So we would say the time of the Middle East is now.
That's right.
And so as we ask ourselves, what does our region have to offer?
What do we have to offer? First, what do we have to offer for next move is warmer meeting venues. I don't know if anyone else has had a problem this week, but our table is freezing. We're freezing. We said, Lord, anything for God, but not that. That's a bit much. I was asking a bit much. So Well, what do we have? We came up with two real main things. Seth referenced it for their region, which I think is really true, and also for ours. We have, I think, to offer what it looks like to persevere through persecution. All across our region, God has taught us what it looks like really to persevere and to endure. We could stand up here and tell stories about people going through horrendous situations, many of them 3-4 months old in their faith. And so as the picture and the effect of, or how Christianity is affected around the world through greater persecution in areas where it was once welcomed, I think our region really has something to offer what it might look like to follow Jesus in hardship. And second, this is referenced by Michael, but is perspective. Our Lord is a Middle Easterner. And reading his life, reading about him through that lens changes, and it's how we're meant to see and understand Jesus. And so I think our region has a lot to offer as we read about him, as we read about the story, the narrative of our family of God is a Middle Eastern-centric family. And so we have something to offer in how we understand our faith and who we are in God and who he is as God. I think those are some of the things that we really honed in on as what we can offer moving forward.
And even as we heard the story about the Legos yesterday, and just Lego realizing they spent how many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to figure out that we needed to build harder Legos that would attract people to buy Legos. I think the reason we're seeing people run to faith in our region is because we haven't watered down the gospel. It's a costly gospel. It's a precious gospel. And so we see people drawn to that. So now as we asked ourselves, we have a lot to teach the rest of the world. What do we need to learn? We kind of came up with a list of things. Number one, America is good for more than just fundraising.
But we love your money.
But we love you. We love the money from America. But what's the mechanism behind the money? And we saw that as a culture of generosity, a culture of sacrificial giving. And we want to see local self-sustainability increased, and we think we have a lot to learn from the West, from America specifically, when it comes to generosity. We also saw a need for leadership development, specifically with a focus on building economic capacity. And we really look at the Indonesian church as an example in this, thriving economically, building up society, especially in the midst of a Muslim context. We value that. We need that wisdom. And when I say leadership development, we're not just talking about in the church. We're talking about outside the church as well. We're lacking young leaders in our region. Something that Micah brought up as well is we want powerful indigenous worship music like our Brazilian brothers and sisters. We're saying, can you teach us how to have this indigenous worship music as well, with local sounds and feelings? And then there's other gaps that we identified as well. A lot of the global surveys that we've looked at, some of the data shared here, we noticed that Middle Eastern voices were not really present. And we don't look at that as a problem with the survey. We look at that as a problem for ourselves. We need more local research, more local and indigenous measurement of what's actually happening in our region. We want to increase our digital competencies. And finally, we also saw, like the gentleman from Africa shared, the need for indigenous, high-level academic resources in the church. We have so many translated resources, but we need to elevate Middle Eastern theologians as well. And so there's a lot for us to learn, and we would value learning it from all of you. And the last thing I'll just kind of share, we came up with some regional values. I know we weren't asked to, but we just like to overachieve a little bit. And so we asked ourselves, as we're growing this region, who are the people that we need to be in the mix? Like what hasn't worked in a previous generation? What needs to work in this generation to work together? And we identified 3 things. 1, we really need to redeem local culture. We want to contextualize things for our culture. We want to be able to raise up and release local leaders. And we want to redeem local culture, not just apply another culture. So we want to learn from the globe, but we want to redeem local culture. And then we also want to strive for relationships and for collaboration, which is pretty clear. I think all of us in this room want relationships and collaboration. Those are the people we want to really run with. And then finally, we want to humbly celebrate each other. We've seen our region riddled with so much competition, and we were just saying a lot of the regional gatherings, everyone's competing. And so we really want to, in a spirit of humility, be able to celebrate each other. We celebrate that the church is growing so fast in Iran. And we say, how can we learn from ourselves? How can we learn from others?
Yeah.
So that's
And
the
the
Middle East
music's
region.
not playing, but we're going to end it. So
Hey,
thank you.
13 seconds early, everyone.